Right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Association Leadership Series 5, Episode 8, Hurricane Preparedness. We are in the beginning of the hurricane season, which runs from June 1st to November 30th. This year is expected to see above normal storm activity. The NOAA said that the 2024 hurricane season has an 85% chance of being above normal. Now, what does that mean? They're calling for 17 to 25 named storms, where the average is 14, 8 to 13 hurricanes, where the average year has 7, 4 to 7 major hurricanes with sustained winds over 111 miles per hour. The average is 3. The numbers are the highest ever estimated by NOAA for its May outlook. So I think today our topic is on point and timely. I want to welcome back Jeff Rembaum and Michael Bender from KBR Legal. Good afternoon, guys.
Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Good. Also want to welcome Brian Street, our EVP at Castle. Brian's in charge of our Castle Emergency Response Team, and he oversees the hurricane prep for all of our association clients. So he's going to take us through the bulk of the discussion today. I do want to remind everybody that Jeff and Michael are only intending to provide general advice, their comments and opinions on the topics to be discussed today. It's a little light from a legal standpoint, guys, but nevertheless, there will be some topics. It's not specifically for your association. It's just a general guidance. We're also going to make available to you a hurricane preparedness plan outline again, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but that is not intended to cover everything for your association, just a kind of a guideline to work off. So you can, as we said, you can chat in your questions on the topics we're discussing today, which is hurricane prep, and I'll try and work them into the discussion as we go through this morning. Today is a good day to test our backup systems at Castle. There is a brutal storm overhead, so if we happen to lose you for a second, stand by. We're right back at it. So we're hoping that we don't have any power challenges. We're going to use the polling feature lightly today. I'm going to start with the first question. Marinez, can you please ask our participants what type of community they live in? The agenda today is going to cover the status update on new legislation, the impact of new legislation on hurricane preparedness. There's some very specific legislation now addressing with respect to hurricane preparedness. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation on how to prepare your community for a hurricane, and then answer any questions that you may have. We did receive a whole bunch of questions about personal preparation for a hurricane. We don't intend to cover that today. There are some great resources. If you go to Castle's website, www.castlegroup.com, we've got the page on the screen here. Under additional resources, under resources, additional resources, hurricane guide. That is a kind of personal checklist that you may want to consider if you're looking for some guidance on what you can do personally. Okay, let's get going, guys. First, Marinez, the results of poll question number 1. Let's see who we have today. We have, about half and half, guys, about half condos and HOAs. We have the same 3 cooperatives that seem to log in every month, so we do appreciate that. And a couple of people not sure that this legal setup for the community. So it's about the normal group, half and half, I would say. Let's get started. Michael, I'm going to ask you, if you don't mind, give us just an update on the status of the legislation that was passed in the latest session, but was waiting for the governor the last time we spoke. So can you give us an update on where we are, please?
Love to. I'll do it very quickly, despite what you might think. There were three bills that impact homeowner associations. All 3 have been signed by the governor to take effect July 1st. That's House Bill 1203 and House Bill 59. And then House Bill 293, that was signed by the governor, took effect immediately. Then there are 2 bills that affect condominium associations with a sprinkle of cooperative. House Bill 1029 has been signed, takes effect July 1st. And then the big condo bill, House Bill 1021, that was sent to the governor, I believe it was June 7th. And he has 15 days to sign that. He has not yet signed it, but as of today, my understanding is he's expected to. So 4 of the 5 bills that we discussed previously have been signed. There are a couple of other smaller bills that have also been signed, but those are the ones that we were focusing on.
Michael, thank you. And I will tell you, props to Jeff. If you don't subscribe to the Rembom Roundup, I highly recommend you do. Jeff just published his latest legislative summary from what's about kind of summarizing the bills and what's going on. Jeff, it's excellent. I know from our listener standpoint, you can go to kbrlegal.com and sign up to get it. So I highly recommend it. Jeff, you did a great job. We see lots of them and it's excellent. So congratulations. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay, guys, let's get into the meat of our webinar today. First, Jeff, with the new legislation, there were some updates on hurricane preparedness, what a board can do with respect to under the new legislation. Can you kind of summarize for us first of all, what a board's responsibilities are in the light of a hurricane, and then what the new legislation talks about?
So we'll start then with fiduciary duty. The board needs to exercise its fiduciary duty. It's reasonable business judgment in preparing the community for any upcoming storm. In an HOA, that really could be tree trimming. Like I live in a 127 home HOA. Our amenities are our front gate and a lift station along with the right-of-ways, but we have a lot of oak trees. So every year before hurricane season, we go to extra length to have all the trees trimmed out so we're ready for that storm. But whatever is unique to your community, you want to at least do your best to be prepared. In the condo, it would be preparing the common element areas, parking lots and such, and making sure that even early on, we're not leaving around debris that we have to scramble later to go ahead and move, et cetera, and so forth. It's better to stay on it. And then, Craig, you were talking about the new legislation Michael had mentioned as well, House Bill 293. That affects HOAs, and it's already in effect on May 28th. So really, on that very day, there was a responsibility to do something that I'm sure very few HOAs even know about to do at this point. But for the first time, HOA boards need to adopt hurricane protection standards for each structure that is within the community. So it could be as simple as the type of shutters that are allowed, or perhaps something isn't allowed, to go ahead and disclose that. I would suggest that be in the nature of a written resolution from the board of directors. And then, of course, you need to publish that resolution so all the members are aware of those new hurricane protection standards, if you will, for all of the buildings, different building types in the HOA. That went into effect on May 28th. So need to go ahead and do that. Then we have House Bill 1021. For years, condominiums have had to also adopt hurricane shutter specifications. Throw that out the window. Now, condominium associations, by and through the board, have to adopt, same as the HOA, hurricane protection standards. Obviously, that could include shutters, but it can include so much more. Once you adopt your hurricane protection specifications, then if the owners vote majority of all, then you can force those owners who haven't yet brought their unit up to the new standard, assuming they don't have anything that is already in compliance, if you will, then through a vote of the ownership, those owners can be made to do that as well, to come into line and to add that hurricane protection. Or you can amend the declaration to make the maintenance and the repair, et cetera, of those hurricane improvements the board responsibility. So now all of a sudden, all the windows and apertures and everything are under the association's maintenance and repair obligations. And that's another way to have the whole building. So there's two ways to do it. One is to take the responsibility at the association level. The other way is through a vote of the unit owners, a majority of all. And that's really in a nutshell. I appreciate the kind words about the 2024 legislative guide. It is extensive this year. There are very few years with as much legislation affecting our condos and HOAs as we see this year. So go to kbrlegal.com. It's right on the homepage. You can go ahead and click and you can download your very own legislative guide. Here, you have my permission to share it with your board members or anybody else you think that will find it useful.
Excellent. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that. So there are some very specific things then that boards need to do. And, those are, I think you now have the mandate to go and do it. I think the reality is this is something that really does require your attorney to give you some guidance on. And I would encourage you to reach out to your attorney and address those things. Okay, let's go on now let's start the meat of our presentation here on hurricane prep. First, though, Marinez, will you post poll question number 2? Does your association have a hurricane plan? And while we're looking for those answers, clearly at Castle, we believe, and it's important to have a plan. And I think we would all agree that it's something that is important. You know, not having one may actually be a breach of your fiduciary duty as a board member. Michael, you have any comments there on that?
I don't. Yes. Yeah. Again, yeah. And Jeff explained it, up front very well. Bottom line is, have a plan in place. We're going to hear from Brian, and he's going to take us through a great roadmap. You were right, by the way. No, not just 6 months. But it's going to take us through a great roadmap. So, but have a plan in place to it just avoids unnecessary exposure to your association. Simple as that.
Good, 23 words, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Greg, what's going on in Canada before we go on into the actual presentation with the Stanley Cup? How are the Oilers doing?
Oh man, that hurts. That digs deep. But I actually am a Panther fan right now, and if you're following the hockey, the Panthers are all over it, which is good. That's very funny, Jeff.
No jinxing, one game at a time.
Yeah, exactly. One game at a time. Okay, let's look at the results of the poll question, Marinez. So encouraging, guys. I mean, half of our participants know that they have one. We're suggesting it's an absolute in Florida to protect yourselves and prepare yourselves at the same time. So,
Craig, if I could just add one thing, if I could say one thing, there's 64 of the 200 there said we don't know. I'm hoping that 64 of you are interested homeowners and not directors. If you are a director, please make sure that I don't know becomes hopefully a yes, or at least a no, but you definitely need to know.
Yes. I think that's a great point, Mike. And we're going to talk a lot about communication. The fact that you don't know as a resident or homeowner, to our point, is we hope your board has one. You should know what it is. And Brian's going to talk a lot about that. Okay, Marinez, that's great. That's great data. Thank you. So let me turn it over to Brian now. Brian, can you walk us through, how we prepare our clients at Castle for a hurricane? And then, to the extent we have comments throughout, guys, let's do that. And then we're going to circle back at the end and talk about some of the legal powers of a board and stuff like that. So, Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, excellent, and I agree. Seeing that a little over 50% were all yeses, that's great. At Castle, it's the old adage: failure to plan is planning to fail. And we take a lot of time to make sure that our managers are planning accordingly. And we spend most of May getting geared up for hurricane season. And just quickly, I know we also have a lot of new residents to Florida that may have never experienced a hurricane. So one of the things I like to do just quickly is kind of talk through the various scales, from a tropical depression, which is, wind speeds of 38 miles an hour or less, all the way up through the category 5, which is above 157 miles an hour. So throughout hurricane season, you will see these different Saffir-Simpson scales throughout the Atlantic and Caribbean areas. So just make sure you're paying attention, you're watching the news, especially for those that are new to Florida. This is going to be a busy season, as Craig mentioned earlier. We're going to have a lot of storms. It's going to be an above average season. The water temperatures are high, which is basically fuel for the storms.
Brian, did they come up with a new standard, new wind speeds? I had heard something about that.
I'm not. I know they've run the ranges a little bit differently, but I believe right now we're sticking to the same Saffir-Simpson scale. I mean, I think they have adjusted some of the wind speeds up or down, but the difference between 129 miles an hour to 130 miles an hour, is not much. I don't think we'll be able to tell the difference. But this is a kind of a quick graphical representation of, even in a category 1, which a lot of people here in Florida that may have gone through a few storms may laugh at, but there's still a tremendous amount of damage that can happen from tree branches falling off. And Jeff, thank you very much for mentioning how your community will do their hurricane tree trimming every single year. Those branches become projectiles, can cause damage to homes. And even if, it's just a simple palm frond that can fly through a window. So, and then 157 miles an hour, it's almost catastrophic damage. Homes are gone, roofs are gone, cars are gone. They've moved down the street. So it basically makes those areas uninhabitable. So, and then quickly, again, we like to just make sure that everybody's aware of the rules. Hurricane season is almost like it's like your muscle. You always have to kind of work out the muscle to make sure you don't forget and you have the muscle memory. So a hurricane watch is basically hurricane conditions or extreme winds are possible in 48 hours. So it's basically you prepare. You need to get ready because they're coming. And then hurricane warning expected in the next 36 hours. And then you have extreme warnings over 115 miles an hour. So it goes back to what type of damage can happen over 115 miles an hour. So take cover immediately.
Right. I think what's important, one of the things we learned last year with Hurricane Ian is the course changed in the last 36 hours dramatically. So these are just, it's funny, you fall into this false sense of security, and I've done it when I first moved down here. Well, the cone doesn't cover, Parkland. And the reality is that doesn't really matter, and it can change in a moment. And that's really what happened with Ian last year.
Exactly right. When we were tracking the storm, Craig, in our CERT meetings, it started off, if everybody can remember, it started off in the Panhandle, and we thought, it's going to hit some more farmer areas, uninhabitable. And within every hour, it was ticking down the coast. And as we were tracking that. And that's where, Craig, to your point, you may not even be in the cone of concern as it narrows down, but there are other risks from if you're near the coast, the storm surge is coming in. And it's we're here in Broward County, and when it's the king tides and the storm surge, it floods. And now you have flood damage, and you may not have even been in the cone of concern. The feeder bands that come with the storms can spawn tornadoes. Obviously, you shouldn't go swimming, but unfortunately, some people do. You have crazy rip currents, and then overall just flooding in your area as the storm is over top of you or the surrounding areas. So one of the things that we like to communicate out to not only just our managers, but the residents as well. You have to stay informed. We recommend the Red Cross Hurricane app. You can go to any app store. Obviously, we're showing the iPhone store, but it's also on Google. And you can download the American Red Cross and set up your notifications for hurricane advisories in your region. So we definitely communicate that out to our residents so that it's not just our communication, it's also coming from the American Red Cross. You cannot over communicate in these times. When there is a storm bearing down on your area, you cannot over communicate what to do and how to prepare. So for Castle, it's all about the culture of preparedness. And I mentioned it earlier, failure to plan is planning to fail. So we start in May, we develop what we call our hurricane plan. And it's shared in our resources on our website for both HOAs and condos. And what that means is you should have an understanding of exactly what needs to happen in your community. We also know that every community is different. Some have a large clubhouse, others don't have any amenities at all. Some towers have, a multiple elevator banks, cooling towers, chillers, pumps. So you as the manager should be able to know exactly what you need to do from each asset in your community. And so basically you take this time and you develop your plan, you fill out your checklist, which is, what do we do with our pool furniture? Do they all stack up in the club room? Where do they go? So we need to make sure that you have everything addressed. And then we talk about, reviewing all of these items with your board. So basically, once you have your plan, go meet with your board. Make sure that they are, all in agreement with how we are going to handle and secure the association in the event that the cone of concern is over top of your association. And so you can see an example here is these are some year over year checklists and newsletters and all the various tools that our managers use throughout the season. The next, and probably one of the most important things that we instill with our managers and our associations is doing a dry run. So in the early part of the season, and obviously anybody that's in South Florida right now where we're getting inundated with rain, it's very similar conditions to what would happen in a hurricane. So we mentioned you should do a dry run, and this means truly putting away every piece of pool furniture, you know exactly where it goes, putting up shutters if you have the shutters. And here's why, is throughout the year, maybe you changed all your pool furniture. Previous seats and chaise lounge, they used to stack. Now they don't. So do they still fit in your club room? Do you still have the drill bits necessary to put up the shutters? You know, in associations that were lucky enough to kind of win in outside of hurricane season, and we go through this process, we find out that they don't have all the shutters. They're missing the wing nuts. They just redid all of their pool equipment and furniture, and we don't have all the information of where it goes. So during this time, we spend most of our 30-day kind of right after start is developing our hurricane plan, because hurricanes can come out of the blue. And the most important part is that we're ready and we understand what needs to happen in that community.
Right. I think it's important again for here, like this is about managing expectations a little bit. Here's your plan is and communicated, here's what we're going to do. The dry run is to make sure we can do it and make sure you have the resources in place to do what you need to do. And I think we get some boards that kind of roll their eyes a little bit, but you really need to go through it hands like the full plan to make sure you have every contingency covered, because the worst thing that can happen is, to your point, you go to set up and your hurricane shutters don't work, and all of a sudden you have some exposure, and you know that could affect your insurance claim if you have one, all of those types of things.
No, absolutely, Craig. And it also determines how long does it take. So if it's going to take you 8 hours to get your site secure, well, that's when there's nothing happening. You've planned it out. You've let the residents know. You've let the board know, and that's 8 hours. Now we're down to, you know, our 7-day window or 4-day window of a storm coming. Everybody is focused on their own personal homes, the rest of the community, and everything else, and it becomes more of a stressful situation, and it could take longer than 8 hours. So again, the most important part of a dry run is understanding how long it takes, and we know that where everything is going to go. If there's debris, you know, or if there's a construction project, how do we prepare? What do we need to do if there's you're redoing the roof or concrete restoration? So you're basically doing this dry run. You understand what you need to do as a manager to protect the association. And probably the most important thing in the dry run, taking pictures. Craig, you mentioned insurance, and this is a huge point of contention when it comes to your insurance claims. They want to make sure that your pre-storm conditions, exactly before the post-storm conditions. So document. Take as many pictures of the building, from roof to the garage or from the HOA, the clubhouse, to make sure that you have everything documented so that in the event of damage, the insurance carrier and the broker that comes out and takes pictures can't claim that this was a pre-storm damage.
Brian, in the past, I have suggested to our clients that they not only have walkie-talkies for at least several of the board members, if not all, so they can stay in touch, but to also have some disposable cameras, because we all rely on our cell phones. And how long is the battery going to last really for that after storm picture taking moments and things like that? So I think it's a good idea to have a way to communicate and also a way to document.
Absolutely. Craig, you mentioned Ian, and when we went over there after the storm, cell service was spotty, and the good news is we require all of our managers to have cell phone chargers in their car. Your car battery will last a little bit longer, but you're right, Jeff. It's important to have other ways of communicating. Our leaders in the various markets also have a satellite phone, because cell service could be down. We want to make sure the leaders can then communicate back to myself, heading up the CERT team, to make sure that we can communicate and understand where there could be potential damage.
Hey, Mike, that's not a bad idea for us. We got our new satellite phones.
You can rent them. So,
yeah, you rent them in the event of a storm. They deliver within 24 hours.
Wow, good to know. Really good to know.
Yeah.
Say that again for everybody. You can rent satellite
so
phones.
You can rent satellite phones and from different carriers. And basically within 24 hours, they are delivered to, we send them out throughout the state. They're delivered to the state.
Wow. Add me to your list, please.
Will do. So again, I go back to making a plan and putting everything together. So you have your plan, you have your checklist, you have any handouts that you may need, print out everything before the storm. So now that we see, the cone of concern is out there, or sometimes on the news, you just may see a tropical depression with a 20-40% chance of forming. Now's your chance. Okay, let's get into hurricane prep mode. We understand what we need to do. And from a manager standpoint, it's working with the board to say, okay, board, we have this potential forming of a hurricane. Let's pause any of our other major projects or things that are going on so that we have the time to prepare. Let's make sure that if we have a generator, we have our fuel lined up. We've already chatted with our landscapers, make sure that they're ready, they're cleaning up, doing any last minute prep before a storm really comes. Again, people make bad decisions in stressful situations. So you want to make sure that you are addressing these items days and weeks in advance of a possible storm.
Brian, I just want to quickly answer a question for Cindy here. We'll post up where you can rent the satellite phones from. And we won't profess to be experts on iPhone satellite capability, so that would probably be a good question for your provider. We do break this in. We call all the work Brian just described as preseason. So that's
Right.
kind of the language we use internally. So what's the preseason plan? Get ready for, June 1.
Yeah, and I see another question on there, Craig. Are these materials available to the board members? Absolutely. Again, we talk about communication from a property manager standpoint. We should be building this plan and then presenting to the board so that we're all on the same page. And one of the most important things, Craig, you and I have chatted about this one on the side, is what to do with an elevator. So if we have our condo towers and our elevators, again, people make bad decisions when it's a stressful environment and everything else. So you want to make sure that everybody's in agreement on where the elevator goes. And if you don't know, call your elevator technician, your provider. They're going to get their information to you and say, you know what, it needs to be stored on the first floor. Shut it down when winds max out at 35 miles an hour, for example. So that is going to go into your plan. You're going to present that to the board, and everybody should come to an agreement. So so it's a great question. We want to share that information. This is not confidential to Castle. This is out there to protect all of the assets throughout the state. So let me go back one more slide. There's a couple points here. So this is now 96 hours out. So about 4 days. Now the storm has come together and we start maybe being in the cone of concern. And, as Craig mentioned, we tracked Ian and it worked its way down the coast. So, but again, you want to start communicating. We may have also a lot of snowbirds that may not get the same news coverage that we get down here in South Florida or in Florida as a whole. So you want to make sure that you're notifying the residents, start taking things off balconies, moving things in off of their patios. You start storing items that you don't need to maybe use over the next couple of days, and you're really in hurricane prep mode. So you are now e-blasting any information out to the residents. You're communicating. You're making sure that you have all your supplies ready, if it's bottles of water or caution tape, things like that. So in the event of some damage, you're ready to go. And then you're tracking.
Brian, I just want to,
Yes.
can I go back for 1 second? I just want to ask Michael if he doesn't mind commenting, with respect, especially with respect to condos. Does the board have a right to enter a unit and clear the balcony if someone's out of town? Michael, can you comment on that if you don't mind?
And again, this is something that should be spelled out. I think it should be referenced in the documents, if not in the covenants and the rules. But the board is, in my opinion, the board is going to have the authority to go onto a balcony and clear it in order to protect the building, that unit, and the residents who are residing within.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Brian, sorry, Michael. Thank you. No, and it's a great point. And this is why we start this process early so that the residents do know that even if they're leaving for the summer and it's June or July, no storms coming out. Typically, we get the bulk of our storms late August, September, kind of early October. But you should have those communications out. If they're leaving for the summer, they need to clear off their balcony in advance of a possible storm.
And even if sometimes for sure if they're concerned, but sometimes people maybe just are out of town for a period of time. A lot of our communities, something else they've done is they'll have contact that they'll give to the management company. so
Right.
that there is someone that they can reach out to who has access to the unit, can come in and secure the unit in the absence of the owner, maybe if they're just away for the weekend or had an unexpected leave for family emergency or otherwise.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's key. And that's the part of the communication, because I can tell you the calls we get, what's happening in my community. And
Yes.
so, that's so important to get in front of that communication. Okay, it's 96 hours. Here's the plan. Here's what we're doing.
Yep.
It's 72 hours. And Brian, you're going to talk about the other ones, but
Absolutely. So, and it literally goes to the culture of preparedness. It's not just, the management company being prepared or the board being prepared. It's also the residents being prepared. And if you start that early enough, it becomes routine and habit. So obviously we're going through this rainstorm now. It's making sure that you have the necessary, flood sacks and everything else. Everything in South Florida will flood in some of these storms. So you want to make sure that you are prepared. You haven't used them. So it isn't hurricane season, but we have this major kind of tropical depression sitting over top of us, dumping a bunch of water. You may be using your flood sacks now. So if you are, it means you're going to have to replace them. So that's where you start doing these dry runs throughout the season. You're double checking on your resources and what you've used so that you can replenish anything that you need throughout the season.
yeah, I think, Brian, sorry, I keep interrupting you, but the comment I want to make there is I laughed at the thing of sandbags that's there. Well, the reality is, guys, the technology now, you can get these expandable flood bags, right? Is that what those are, Brian?
Yeah, the flood sacks, right. So there's
Flood sacks.
Sandless sandbags is what they're called.
Yeah. And you can store them. They're like air conditioning filters. Like you can literally store them in a box and you pull them out and they get wet and they expand. So it's not like you have to have sandbags all over the place, but you want to be ordering your flood sacks now, because good luck getting them when you're in the middle of, a flood zone. I think the other thing I want to ask comment on flood protection is, from an HOA standpoint, really important to get your gutters all cleaned out, right? Like make sure all of the branches are off the road, all those types of things, so that the water can drain. All of these communities are engineered to properly drain in the event of, a flood, in the event of a flood event, if you will. So
Right.
They're all engineered to properly drain, but if you don't let the natural drainage work, you'll have a problem.
It's a great, and going back to my engineering roots, Craig, they are designed to hold a little bit of water until it hits a certain elevation, which is very small. But what we see and where there is damage is when the grates out in the roadways are covered.
Yeah.
The leaves, branches, everything is now covered them, and there's nowhere for that water to go. And that's when you start getting flood conditions where they're going up the driveways and everything else. So as a manager, you should be driving your community in that 96 hours. Let's make sure that all of those grates are uncovered.
Yep.
So again, now we start working into the 3 days out, which means you've stopped all major projects. Again, you should have this in your contracts too, by the way, of if you're doing a major concrete renovation or roofing project, in the event of a storm, what is any demobilization costs or anything else. And again, I would say go through your contracts, double check to make sure you have them. Obviously have counsel review your contracts. It's probably one of the most important things to do, but make sure that you're putting your finishing touches on any cleanup and preparation of any major projects that are going on, so that you are prepared and some of those items do not become projectiles to properties even next to you. So now 36 hours out, we want to make sure that, we're in the last stages of preparedness. We've gone through our checklist. We have our sandbags, our sandless bags in the way to make sure that we can reduce any amount of water that's coming in. We've communicated out to our residents as well. We're tracking the storm. We know what's happening. We're in the cone, and what to do. Again, a lot of your residents could be back up north and they're not getting the same type of communication. So you want to make sure that at least either every 12 hours or every 24 hours, you are communicating something out to the residents and the board, and reminding them of what to expect, that the elevator is going to be on the first floor. If you're not in an evacuation area, and then maybe I have a question for for Michael as well. If you're not in an evacuation area, or you are, and the resident decides to stay, but the elevators are going to be shut down, the cooling towers may be shut down based on guidance from our various vendors. What type of Are we lenient? Can we force them? What can we do if a resident decides to stay in a building?
I mean, you're not going to physically remove someone. You're going to certainly document that you've made it very clear the mandatory evacuation order, and anyone staying is assuming the risks. In fact, the emergency powers even have language that says that if you instruct everyone, and they should be very well documented from management and the board, that they've been instructed to leave. That in fact you can further document conversations with individuals who are choosing to stay, that the association will be immune from liability for any harm. Obviously people need to be smart about these things. They have to take and make their own independent, smart decisions. Jeff, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think we'll talk about the emergency orders in the legislation, I think, a little later on in the presentations.
Perfect. Yep. Thank you, Michael. And then, obviously we continue to prepare, communicate. Again, we're getting to shutting down the ACs, and in this heat, obviously 36 hours out without AC, it's going to be a little warm and uncomfortable, but that's what the recommendations are from the, AC vendors, your cooling towers, your elevators, things like that. And then 24 hours out.
These are things, guys. Sorry, Brian. These are things that if you're a board member, your community is not going to be happy with, right? They don't understand, unless you've communicated well, why is the air conditioning being shut down 36 hours in advance of a storm? It's not coming. You can hear it all, and we hear it all the time. The two biggest flashpoints in a condo are shutting the air conditioning off and turning down, and stopping the elevators from working. Those are probably because there's no storm 36 hours out. There's going to be a storm, but there is no storm. So I think you have to be prepared as a board. You're going to get that resident who has that discussion. It's where the communication comes into play.
Absolutely. And now we're down to the 24 hours. And so this is the last bit of preparation. You've finished your elevator stoppage. You've backed up all your systems while you still have power. You've lifted everything off the floor in the event of a flood. And you basically, if you're in an HOA, your gates will now be open. Either they're taken down or they're open and tied off, which is another flashpoint for our HOA world, is that, the security officers may be going home. They need to also be safe and protect their families just as much as the management company teammates. So your gate access may be open. And so that becomes a flashpoint for our residents that feel that all the vagrants are going to be coming through their community right in front of a hurricane. And then during the storm, most importantly, you have to stay safe. Stay home, make sure your families are protected, things of that nature. You as a resident and a board should be staying safe within your community, or if you have if you had to be evacuated at another site. From our standpoint at Castle, our managers will stay in constant contact with our team to make sure that they are safe. From your housekeepers, your front desk, they're going to be checking in on them to make sure that, they're safe. There's no impact because they're going to be spread out throughout the county or the area of concern. And then if anything is immediately impacting their area, they're going to try to communicate that out. The other piece that I would recommend is we have backups in place. So if, Ian hit on Southwest Florida side and the cell service and a lot of power was down for a long period of time, we were able to send communications to home office, to my team here in Plantation, which was, had rain and lightly affected, but, we were up and running. And we were able to send some communications out from our terminals here to make sure that we were still communicating with the residents, even though the managers at the site didn't have power and couldn't turn their computers on, but they had access to the tools available to communicate to all the residents. And then after the storm, I would say, this is one of what is most important. Our managers must be back to the site as soon as possible. We say, anywhere between 2 to 4 hours after the all clear is given. And what that means is you need to get back and document. Is it just some tree branches down? Do you have major damage to the roof, leaks, anything like that? You want to make sure that you get back to the site as fast as possible to document so that you can, if you need to, file your insurance claim. You want to communicate back to the board saying that you're back on property. The team is coming back. We're going to start our cleanup. You've communicated to your residents that you're back on property. However, depending on the level of damage, things may still remain closed. Your clubhouse is closed. Your pools are closed for the time being until you can get the pool company out to inspect the chemicals, all those different things. So it's important to get back and assess and triage what needs to be fixed immediately so that you can get the association back up and running as fast as possible.
Right. I think what I want to add here is a comment on, especially in the HOA world, where a lot of the damage is landscaping damage, trees down, roadways blocked. And, one of our recommendations is get with your landscape company, get an agreement in place with them. So you can, they're first responders for you, right? They're at your property quickly. So you're wise during the kind of pre-season to get with your landscaping company. If you're an HOA, get with your AC company, make sure you have an agreement in place to, have them come right away, because the worst thing is the biggest challenge is access is the biggest challenge in HOAs. And certainly that is an issue in condos as well.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to the preparation before. Now you have your initial pictures and you have your post-storm pictures. So it makes it very difficult for the insurance carrier to deny claims because you have, pre and post-storm information. And then making sure that, you've now working to get your elevators turned back on, you've collected the sandbags, and you're basically getting back up to normal operating routines. And excuse me, it all depends on, obviously the severity of damage, but, a lot of the HOAs, as Craig mentioned, is just storm debris. So how fast can your landscapers get out there to clean things up? Again, early on in the season, you may have signed a post-storm agreement, getting that together and going. So it's very important. That's where, you're prepared. So again, I mentioned, the communication, that is key. You want to communicate daily, if not more often. We have backups here to be able to communicate out. Different associations have different modules, Town Square, Building Link. Those have some applications as well that can monitor the communication and get that out. So you really just want to make sure that you're letting people know. Again, maybe half of your residents are back up north and don't understand. We get phone calls in our resident services department. How is my unit? What's going on? So the more information you can get out timely, the happier everybody will be. So again, we had this slide earlier, which is we've added our hurricane plan for both a HOA and a condo. So if you need an example, I will caution, these are templates. They need to be modified for your specific association. So if you have a condo, it will mention, cooling towers or chillers or pumps. You may not have all those assets. You may have more. So just use it as a, kind of as a guide, but it's not the end all be all.
Right, and that's great. Are you going to be able to pull up a plan? Because I think your presentation goes through the importance of planning. I just really wanted to show everybody what a plan would look like, what you'll see when you get on our website, if you don't mind. Can you pull that up?
Absolutely do that. Let me do that
So
right
let's just
now.
quickly go through what a plan looks like. Again, our philosophy or Castle is make sure everybody's safe. So this is information that is available on our website. Download it, customize it for your association.
So basically what we have here is our, obviously it's customized to your individual site. A lot of very similar information, what we do 96. And so 96, 72, 48 hours in advance. What does it mean to be prepared? Different links that you should have saved either to your website or to your internet provider, so you can know where to go to look for information, where to go during a storm. And then obviously the post-storm criteria, what does that mean? Maybe it's getting one, once the storm passes, getting one guard back. You may not need everybody because all of your amenities aren't open. So again, as I mentioned, this is just a basic guide for you to talk through certain things with your boards and get prepared.
I did see our Castle teammate hotline. Please don't call our Castle teammate hotline for updates.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So,
well, again, for our listeners, that's available on the website. Can you put the link back up again, just so everybody can see where to go?
Yes, I will do that. Okay. Absolutely.
Well, Brian, that's great stuff. Go ahead.
No, all good. And then let me just pull that back up here. And one more time. So on CastleNet directly, resources, additional resources, and you'll see the plan, HOA and condo in the lower left-hand corner.
So that's www.castlegroup.com. Resources, hurricane resources, there are the plans. So you're welcome to access those. Okay, Brian, that's fantastic. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I want to get into a couple of questions that came in. We touched on it a little bit before. Jeff, I think you're out there in space somewhere, but back, which is great.
Never
we
left.
talked about the a resident leaving a unit in the face, not leaving in the face of an evacuation order. I wanted you to comment on that again, just to make sure we're clear. And then, Michael, I'm going to get you to go through really what are the emergency powers of the board in the event there's a hurricane. So, Jeff, will you touch on the whole evacuation order, maybe getting into the going onto a balcony to clear debris and stuff like that, and then we'll move to a more general discussion.
Association certainly has a right of access to protect and care for and maintain and repair the common elements as necessary. Every condominium association, by its very nature, has that right of access. So if you need to get in there, you get in there. Ideally, you'll always give notice. If you should have the keys to all of the units, those keys need to be secured. There should be a policy about who has access to those keys as well, so the owners don't have to worry, that someone has access that shouldn't have access and that sort of thing. But generally speaking, you do what you have to do. It's the old John Wayne theory. If you're in a true emergency situation, you got to do what you got to do.
I think that's great guidance. Do what's right, then dot the I's and cross the T's. I think that's.
I think from a practical perspective as well, never go into a unit alone. Always have another witness with you. If you can, have a video camera running at the same time so that you're not later accused of causing some damage that you didn't actually cause, or the missing diamond ring and all that good stuff. So
yeah. Okay, Michael, those are specifics. There are some general emergency powers that a board gets in the event of a hurricane. What maybe triggers those, and can you summarize what those are for the board?
Yeah, well, it has to be a state of emergency. What the emergency powers are set forth in 718.1265 of your Condominium Act. For our three cooperative listeners, it's in 719.128 of the Cooperative Act, 719. And 720.316 of the Homeowner Association Act. So it is in all three, and they they very closely mirror each other. There is small difference between the HOA emergency powers and the condominium cooperative ones, primarily focusing on the fact that in the condominium cooperative, there's additional allowance to mitigate further damages within the unit. Because the thought process, generally speaking, is the condominium, if you have like water damage in a unit, it's going to impact the rest of the building. Whereas an HOA, yes, in some instances, some HOAs that will be the case, but it's not included in the HOA because they're thinking more of the single family detached home setting. So state of emergency needs to be declared. If the governor declares a state of emergency, the emergency powers are triggered, and I am not going to go through them all. Obviously, again, 718.1265, 719.128, 720.316. They're going to allow the board to have certain authority to the extent it says in the statute, to the extent allowed by law unless specifically prohibited by the deck articles or bylaws. The following powers are going to be able to be exercised by the board if there's a state of emergency. And that's conducting all meetings, board meetings, committee meetings, membership meetings virtually. It's the ability to name assistant officers who are not directors, so that if officers are unavailable, that you can name assistant officers to be able to conduct business. Entering into agreements with local counties and municipalities to address, to assist with debris removal, for example. It is a big one is the authority, notwithstanding your governing documents requiring the board to need membership vote to borrow. It does clearly allow the board in a state of emergency to enter into a loan to address issues related to the state of emergency without a vote of the membership, even if your documents require that vote. It does clarify that the board does have the authority to approve special assessments to address issues related to cleanup with the state of emergency, notwithstanding the fact that your documents may provide otherwise. Although, as we've previously discussed, I believe the law supports that anyway, if it's necessary maintenance, repair, replacement. But regardless, they did codify that. As I mentioned, in the condo, 718.1265, and I believe it's parroted in 719.128, allows the board to mitigate further damage, injury, or contagion. And this was amended post-COVID to add contagion, including taking action to contract for the removal of debris and to prevent or mitigate the spread of fungus or contagion, including but not limited to mold or mildew, by removing and disposing of wet drywall, insulation, carpet, cabinetry, or other fixtures, even if the owner is responsible for those. It also does add language that says if the association does step in to mitigate that damage, the expense of it is able to be charged back to the unit owner as an assessment under 718.116. So those are some of the highlights. But again, in the situation where we do have a state of emergency and your emergency powers are going to be kicking in, you should certainly communicate with your management team, with your legal counsel, and know your do's and don'ts.
Excellent, Michael. Thank you. I think you made a comment about borrowing money, and there's two. Obviously, there's an immediate need for funds to clean up. But the other thing, and the last thing I want to talk about today on the webinar, is how you can fund your hurricane deductible. So, all associations have wind policies. They typically have a 3 to 5% wind deductible. It's a lot of money. So first, Marinez, can you post poll question number 3? Has your association set aside funds for the deductible on your wind policy? And let's see what's going on out there, because again, this is a big number. So we're curious as to how people can deal with it. One of the options, of course, is that we've arranged for an emergency line of credit. So we already are pre-approved for an emergency line of credit to, 1, fund the deductible, 2, to do any repairs. So that's kind of one strategy to look at. But Jeff, I want you, if you don't mind, to specifically address, can an association set aside funds for a deductible? Can they set up a reserve fund? Like, what are the tools they can use?
Sure. I can't wait to see these results. Think we've given enough time?
Yeah. Why don't we, Marinez, let's post them now, because I think it's a good feel. So look at it. Why pretty even split. Interestingly, actually, that's not true. About 30% have in one, either an emergency line of credit or a restricted fund, and a number of other ones haven't. And I think, Jeff, I'm going to let you answer. Then I want to talk a little bit about our strategy with respect to surplus. So go ahead.
It would be a misnomer to say that you can create a reserve for a hurricane deductible or the unexpected hurricane expenses that can occur. By definition, the reserve schedule, right? You're talking about a capital item with a useful life and replacement and estimated replacement cost. So you really can't create a reserve schedule for that. And even if you did call it a reserve, now you're funding it mandatorily, right? Unless you take that vote of the owners, because it's not in one of the little G Sears items. But to call it a reserve would just be wrong. If you want to call it a contingency fund, that's fine. If you want to protect the money so it cannot be used for another purpose, so the board can't one day, 5 years from now, use those monies for the pet gazebo project that some board member wanted, you need a vote of the owners. Because if the board creates the contingency fund by resolution alone, a future board can undo that resolution. So I think if you really want to protect that money, you take a vote of the owners, you amend it into the declaration itself, or maybe into the bylaws, as the case may be, and it's such that it gives the board limited discretion. But if they want to use that money for a different purpose, then it really needs to go back out for a membership vote. Don't call it a reserve, call it a contingency fund and earmark it for the various expenses. But especially in a condo, you're really not supposed to be assessing for anything that is not provided by law or set out in your governing documents. So go ahead and talk with your attorney. Go ahead and do it the right way if you're going to do it.
I think, interestingly, the survey kind of reflects, I think, Castle's feelings generally on this. Is, hurricanes are extraordinary events. Extraordinary events don't get funded by operating budgets and reserve items. They get funded by special assessments, and that's kind of what that tool is for. I think what we also advocate for, though, is, an association should have between 1 and 3 months of cash in surplus. And that gets you over a lot of the hurricane cleanup stuff, right? The stuff that comes in, you got to pay the landscaper 30 grand because he's got to clean the community. You should be able to absorb some subset of that in your budget. It's when you get into the deductible on a hurricane claim that you need the other tools, the line of credit tool, the
Right.
the special assessment tool. So I think that's kind of how we feel about that. Do you have any other comments?
And
I
yeah, I
was
do.
gonna say, I think I'm sorry, Jeff. I was going to say
No.
the revolving line of credit that you mentioned, Craig. The reason why that's important is because that gives you the funds immediately. And then you can impose the special assessment on the owners to repay the funds that you're trying over a period of time, but you're going to need those funds immediately. And so it's being able to have that in hand, and usually they're 2 years, maybe 3 years, but speak to your business team, speak to your bank reps and see what you can get for that. Sorry, Jeff.
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, I think
Trust everything I know,
just the the banks do charge a fee for that. It's a standby letter of credit, but it's like insurance for your insurance claim. Like that's really what it is. So those are kind of good tools. Guys, that kind of winds up today. I want to just ask you what you think is the most important thing an association needs to do to be prepared for a hurricane, and then we'll wind up with that. Let's start, Brian, for you. The most important thing that an association can do.
I think performing a dry run now to be ready so that the entire team and the board and the residents know what the management company is going to be doing in the event of a storm.
Good stuff. Jeff?
Have a written plan, have access to the monies.
Yeah. Michael, anything to add to that?
They basically they've got it covered. I mean, it's really, and communicate to the membership. Make sure everybody's aware. All of those don't knows. Next time we do a poll, there should be 0 don't knows.
No,
And I want to add
right.
one more item to it as well. Craig, one more item. Do
Yep.
you know how to reach,
Yep.
you're a board member, do you know how to reach your lawyer outside of the office? Does your lawyer give you, the board members, your cell phone number so you can stay in touch? If not, why not? Right? Every client of mine has my cell phone number. They know how to reach me if God forbid there's an emergency. You need that with your manager. You need that with your lawyer. You need that with your team.
Well, my piece of advice is going to be hire a property management company. It's a little self-serving, but notwithstanding, you need some resources to help you through it.
You guys play a very important role, Craig, and you guys prepare your clients just fantastically, as I've seen.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that. Okay, well, listen, Michael and Jeff, always a pleasure. Brian, thank you for joining us. Go Panthers. The next webinar, I think, is July 17th.
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now.
July 17th. My partner, James Donnelly, our chairman, will be hosting a webinar on the 17th, and we'll see you guys back in the middle of August. So thanks, everybody. Be safe and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.